I remember the first time I told her about my idea, how my heart was pounding, how I could barely contain my excitement. I'd spent countless nights drafting my business plan, dreaming up every detail, every possibility. I was obsessed, honestly. To me, it wasn't just a plan. It was a vision of the future, a chance to prove to myself that I could build something real. But when I shared it with her, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, she didn't see it the way I did. We were sitting at our tiny kitchen table, the morning sun spilling across the dishes we hadn't washed from the night before. I laid it all out for her, the numbers, the market research, the grand vision that had kept me up for weeks. My voice was trembling with excitement, but she just leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, and laughed. She actually laughed. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You really think people are going to buy into that? You're wasting your time." I remember that moment so clearly, the way her laughter sliced through my chest, how it made me feel like I'd been punched in the gut. In that instant, all the excitement I'd been carrying turned to ash. She didn't just dismiss my plan, she dismissed me. The person who was supposed to be my partner, my confidant, looked at my dream and saw a joke. For weeks after, I tried to shake it off. I told myself she was just in a bad mood that morning, that she didn't mean it. But the truth is, her laughter haunted me. Every time I sat back down at my desk to refine my plan, I could hear her voice in my head, mocking me, telling me I'd never make it. And it didn't stop there. She started picking at every little thing I did. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about the business, or change the subject to something she thought was more practical. I felt like I was living with someone who didn't believe in me at all. The woman I loved had turned into my biggest critic, and every day it chipped away at me a little bit more. I tried to fight it. I'd wake up early to work on my idea before she was even out of bed. I'd stay up late, mapping out strategies, researching, pouring my soul into this thing that felt like my only shot at something bigger. But no matter how hard I worked, that laughter was always there, echoing in my mind. Looking back, I think that was the moment I realized she'd never see me the way I wanted her to. It wasn't just about the business, it was about how she saw me. And in that realization, I felt something break inside me, a mix of shock, anger, and this deep, hollow sadness. Because I knew, even if she couldn't see it, I had to find a way to prove her wrong. In the days that followed, her laughter became a constant echo in my mind. Every time I looked at my business plan, every time I dared to dream just a little bigger, that mocking voice was there, trying to snuff out the spark. It was more than just doubt. It was like a slow, suffocating poison that seeped into everything I did. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter what she thought, that it was my dream, my risk to take. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, her words kept eating at me. Every late night I spent working on the plan felt a little more lonely, a little more desperate. I'd sit there in the dark, surrounded by sketches and spreadsheets, and wonder if she was right. Maybe I was just chasing a fantasy. Then came the little things. Subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. I'd find her on the phone late at night, her voice hushed, the conversation ending the moment I walked into the room. She stopped asking me about my progress, stopped caring about the little wins I managed to scrape together. When I tried to share a new breakthrough or an encouraging email from a potential investor, she'd barely look up from her phone, her smile forced and brittle. And there were other signs too, like how she'd suddenly start making plans without me. "I'm going out with some friends," she'd say, her tone casual but her eyes avoiding mine. Or how she'd stay late at work, claiming she had to finish some project, but coming home hours after her usual shift ended. I wanted to believe she was just busy, that it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew something was shifting between us. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home. She was there, but it was like she'd already moved on. Our conversations turned into clipped exchanges about groceries and bills, never about dreams or the future. And every time I tried to bring it up, she'd shut me down. "You're imagining things," she'd say with a sigh, like I was being unreasonable for even asking. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It was in the way she looked at me, like she was already somewhere else, like I was just a reminder of the person she didn't want to be tied to anymore. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it was there, every time I caught her glancing at her phone, or saw that flicker of irritation when I mentioned the business. I remember one night I was sitting at my desk, poring over my numbers, trying to find some way to make it all make sense. I could hear her in the other room, laughing at something on her phone. That laughter, it was like a knife twisting in my chest, because it wasn't the kind of laugh we used to share. It wasn't for me. It was for someone else. I confronted her once, late at night when I couldn't take it anymore. "Who are you talking to all the time?" I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of all the doubts that had been building inside me. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, come on. Don't start with your paranoia," but it wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. And as much as I wanted to believe her, I couldn't. Because every time she brushed me off like that, it felt like she was driving a wedge deeper and deeper between us. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we'd shared. The way she used to look at me when I talked about my ideas. The way she used to hold my hand and promise me she'd always be there. I wanted to believe that person was still there somewhere, that this was just a rough patch we'd get through. But the more I looked, the less I recognized her. And the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, the betrayal ran deeper than I was ready to admit. I started checking her social media, looking for clues, desperate for any sign that would prove what my gut was screaming at me. And I found them. Little hints, like pictures she'd posted without me, nights out with friends I'd never even heard of, captions that felt like tiny daggers. Each one was like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to see. I was caught in this terrible limbo, half of me still clinging to the hope that I was just being insecure, the other half knowing in my bones that I wasn't. And as I stared at my business plan late into the night, I realized that the dream I'd been working so hard for was the only thing keeping me afloat. Because if I couldn't trust her anymore, I had to trust myself, even if I was the only one who did. It was a Saturday morning when everything finally snapped into focus. I woke up before dawn, the house silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. I lay there in the half-light, listening to her breathing beside me, steady and oblivious. My mind was racing, replaying every sign, every whispered phone call, every cold shoulder. And in that quiet, I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I got out of bed as carefully as I could, my feet cold on the wooden floor. My hands were shaking, but I moved with a kind of deliberate calm, like I'd stepped outside myself. I'd spent weeks feeling like a ghost, doubting my own instincts. But now, it was like every piece was falling into place, and I was done ignoring it. I started with her phone. She'd never let it out of her sight, always clutched tight like a lifeline. But that morning, she was sleeping so soundly, her face soft and peaceful, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I slid the phone from the nightstand, holding my breath as I unlocked it. She'd always thought I was too trusting to ever look, but she didn't know what desperation could do. The messages were all there, late-night conversations with some guy named D. I didn't know who he was, but the words were enough to make my chest tighten like a vice. Flirty jokes, inside references I didn't understand, plans to meet up when I thought she was working late. It wasn't just casual, it was a whole other life, hidden right under my nose. I felt sick reading them, my stomach turning with every line. But I kept going, forcing myself to see it all, because I knew I needed proof, something solid that she couldn't twist or deny. I screenshotted every conversation, every photo they had sent, every secret she'd thought I'd never find. I saved them all to a folder on my laptop, locking them away like ammunition. I didn't confront her right away. As much as I wanted to burst into the bedroom and scream at her for every lie she'd told, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. If she could lie to me so easily, she'd find a way to lie her way out of it too. So, I waited. I played dumb, acted like nothing had changed, all while I planned my next move. During the day, I'd sit at my desk, working on my business plan like a man possessed. But at night, I was piecing together every scrap of evidence I could find. Old receipts she'd hidden in her purse, emails she thought I'd never see, credit card charges that didn't add up. The more I looked, the clearer the picture became. She'd been planning to leave me behind for months. I was just the last to know. It hurt. God, it hurt. But there was something else under the hurt, something that felt almost like clarity. For so long, I'd been trying to make her believe in me, in my vision. I'd let her laughter and her doubts poison my confidence, make me feel small. But seeing the truth laid out in front of me like that, it was like a switch flipped in my head. I realized I didn't need her belief. I didn't need anyone's belief, but my own. So, I started to play my own game. I backed up all the files, kept copies in places she'd never find. I started talking to old friends, people who'd always been in my corner, but who I'd drifted away from while I was wrapped up in her. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. I let them see the cracks in my life, the truth I was done hiding, and as I gathered my allies, I kept working on my business. If she was going to walk away from me, fine. But she wasn't going to walk away with my dreams too. I poured everything I had into refining my plan. Late nights running numbers, early mornings reaching out to potential investors, networking like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. I knew the day would come when I'd have to confront her, when I'd have to lay it all out and watch her face as she realized I knew everything. But I wasn't rushing it. I wanted to be ready, not just to end things with her, but to step into the next phase of my life, stronger, sharper, unbreakable. There were moments when the anger almost consumed me, when I'd see her smiling at her phone, or hear her voice go soft and sweet in the other room, and I'd have to bite down on my own tongue to keep from exploding. But I kept my mask on, I kept my head down, because I wasn't going to let her see me broken, not anymore. The funny thing is, in those quiet, lonely hours of the night, I started to feel more like myself than I had in years. Without her voice in my ear telling me I couldn't, I could finally hear my own, and it was telling me to fight, to build, to prove, not to her but to me, that I was worth believing in. So I waited, I planned, and every day that passed, I felt the weight of her betrayal turn into something else, something like fuel. Because if she thought she could laugh at my dreams and leave me in the dust, she didn't know who she was dealing with, not anymore. It was a Friday evening, the kind that should have been filled with laughter and plans for the weekend. But for me, it was the night I'd been waiting for, the night everything would come to a head. I'd spent days rehearsing what I was going to say, but as I sat in the living room waiting for her to come home, my heart was still pounding like a war drum in my chest. The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. My business plan sat in a neat stack on the coffee table, every page marked with notes and corrections. Next to it was my laptop, the folder of screenshots and evidence open and ready. I wanted her to see it all, every word, every lie. When she finally walked in, the air shifted. She was dressed like she'd just come from some fancy dinner, her makeup perfect, her smile wide. But when she saw me sitting there, that smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down. "What's going on? Why are you just sitting there?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch between us, thick and heavy. Then I picked up the laptop and turned it so she could see the screen. "You want to tell me who he is?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. Too calm. It was the kind of calm that comes when the storm has already broken inside you. She blinked, her eyes darting to the screen. "What are you talking about?" I clicked through the screenshots one by one. Her face paled as the words she'd sent to him appeared in front of her. I watched her lips part, watched the flicker of panic in her eyes as she realized she couldn't lie her way out of this. "I know everything," I said, my voice rising. "Every message, every meeting, all those nights you said you were working late. Turns out you were working on something else entirely." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Don't even try to deny it. You think I'm blind? You think I'm a fool?" Her mouth snapped shut. She took a step back, her shoulders stiffening like she was bracing for a blow. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble, not tonight. "You laughed at me," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of it all. "You looked me in the eye and told me my dreams were worthless. But you know what? I'm done listening to your laughter. I'm done letting you make me feel small." I stood up, grabbing the folder of my business plan and holding it tight to my chest. "You see this? This is everything I've worked for, everything you said was impossible, and I'm going to make it real, with or without you." She swallowed hard, her hands curling into fists. "So what? You're just going to throw everything away over some stupid messages?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "This isn't about some stupid messages. This is about you betraying me, tearing me down every chance you got. You didn't just cheat on me, you tried to kill my spirit." Her face twisted. "You're overreacting." I shook my head, my voice low and steady. "No, I'm finally reacting the way I should have from the start. She tried to grab the laptop, but I pulled it away. You don't get to erase this. You don't get to rewrite the story. Then what? She spat. You're just going to, what, throw me out? I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. You already threw yourself out a long time ago. The finality in my voice seemed to hit her like a slap. She stared at me, her eyes wide and wet, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, my chest tight, but my head clear. I've already talked to the landlord. Your name's not on the lease, and I'm done playing house with someone who's just here to break me down. I want you out by tomorrow. She laughed then, a harsh, brittle sound. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you're some hero in your own story. I stared at her, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I don't care if I'm the hero. I just know I'm done being the fool. She stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long moment, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally torn off a mask I'd been wearing for too long. I turned back to my laptop, staring at the folder of my business plan. It felt like a lifeline in that moment, proof that I still had something worth fighting for, something that was mine and mine alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, mapping out the next steps of my plan, fueled by a fire I hadn't felt in years. I sent out emails to potential partners, drafted proposals, and wrote out goals that made my chest ache with possibility. And in the quiet hours of the night, I realized that this betrayal, as gut-wrenching as it was, had done something I hadn't expected. It had set me free from her doubts, free from the weight of her laughter, free to finally chase the dream I'd been holding on to all along. Because I knew now, no matter what she said, no matter how many times she tried to tear me down, my dream was worth everything, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me again. The next morning was colder than usual, the air crisp and sharp. She packed her things in silence, her face pale and drawn. There was no more laughter, no more snide remarks, just the quiet weight of finality pressing down on both of us. She tried to avoid my gaze, but I didn't look away. I watched her, every box she carried a symbol of the life we'd built, and the lies that had unraveled it. I didn't feel triumphant watching her leave. I felt hollow, like I'd cut out a piece of my own heart, but knew it was the only way to survive. She didn't say goodbye when she closed the door behind her. Just a quiet click, and she was gone. Word got out fast. Friends who'd seen us as the perfect couple were stunned. Some of them called to ask what had happened, their voices laced with curiosity and disbelief. I didn't give them all the details. I didn't need to. But the whispers spread anyway, about the messages, the secret meetings, the betrayal. Her carefully curated image of our relationship fell apart in the eyes of those who mattered most. The truth has a way of doing that. I focused on moving forward. I changed the locks, scrubbed the apartment clean of her presence. Every picture of us, every trace of her laughter, I cleared it out like an exorcism. My home felt like mine again, for the first time in what felt like forever. But even as I started to breathe a little easier, there were nights when the echoes of her betrayal crept in, when I'd wake up in the dark, half expecting to find her next to me, only to remember she was gone. Those moments were like ghost pains, sharp and sudden, but fading with time. What kept me steady was the work. My business plan became more than just a dream. It became my anchor. Every day I poured myself into it. Every late night spent refining the details. Every call and meeting a testament to the fact that I wasn't going to let her be the end of my story. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were moments when I wanted to crawl back, to beg her to come back and make it all okay. But I knew those were just echoes of an old life, a life built on sand. The real victory wasn't in proving her wrong. It was in proving to myself that I was stronger than her doubt, stronger than her betrayal. And as the days passed and the pieces of my life settled back into place, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Because even though the pain of what she did still lingered like a bruise, it was fading. And in its place was the quiet, steady certainty that I was finally on the path I was meant to walk. A path that was mine, and mine alone. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of her absence slowly lifted. It was like I'd been holding my breath for years, and finally, I could exhale. The apartment was mine again, Quiet, yes, but calm. I filled the space with the things that mattered: my books, my sketches, the early drafts of my pitch deck spread out on the dining table. It was messy in a way that felt alive, like a snapshot of everything I was working for. My business plan, the one she had laughed at, became my sanctuary. I poured myself into it with a focus I'd never had before. Every doubt she'd planted in me was a reminder to work harder, to prove, first to myself, then to the world, that my idea was worth believing in. And as I refined it, polished every detail, I started to see it not just as a plan, but as a promise to myself that I wouldn't let anyone's disbelief define my worth again. I started reaching out to people who saw the same potential I did. Old mentors, new investors, colleagues who had always been just out of reach when I was too caught up in her shadow. I scheduled meetings, took risks I'd never dared to take before, and to my surprise, people listened. They didn't laugh. They saw the passion, the hours of work, the vision that had carried me through those dark nights. Slowly, the dream I'd held onto in secret started to become something real. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, rejections, days when I wondered if maybe she'd been right all along. But the difference was, I didn't let those doubts stop me. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet, to trust my instincts in a way I'd never dared before. Each small victory, each inch forward, felt like a quiet rebellion against the voice in my head that still echoed with her laughter. And somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need anyone's validation to make this work. Not hers, not anyone's. The only voice I had to answer to was my own. A year later, my business wasn't just an idea on paper anymore. It was a real company, with a team that believed in the vision as fiercely as I did. We launched our first product, and the response was more than I could have hoped for. Investors came knocking, customers started talking. My idea, once nothing more than a fragile hope, was now something that people wanted to be a part of. I remember standing in my tiny office on launch day, surrounded by the hum of computers and the buzz of excitement, and thinking about how far I'd come, how far I'd climbed out of that darkness she'd left me in. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Because the truth is, her betrayal didn't break me. It woke me up. It forced me to see that the only person I needed to believe in me was me. And now, with the pieces of my life finally coming together, I could look back and see the wisdom in all of it, the strength I'd found in the cracks she'd tried to leave behind. I won't pretend I never think about her, or that the sting of what she did has vanished completely. But I don't let it define me anymore, because I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of, and no amount of laughter or doubt can ever take that away from me again. Looking back, I realize now that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. In fact, sometimes it's the beginning of a better one. One where you learn just how strong you really are when there's no one else left to lean on. The night she laughed at my dreams, I thought I'd never recover from the sting of her disbelief. But what I didn't know then was that her laughter would become the spark that lit the fire inside me. It's funny how people can shape us in ways we never expect. She tried to tear me down, but all she really did was force me to build myself back up, stronger, wiser, unshakable. And in the process, I found something she could never take away. My own voice, my own resolve. The truth is, it's easy to let other people's opinions define us, to let their doubts seep in and drown out our own convictions. But when the world goes quiet and you're left alone with nothing but your dreams and the echo of someone else's laughter, that's when you find out what you're really made of. You learn that your worth doesn't come from who believes in you. It comes from the quiet, relentless belief you have in yourself. I used to think that love was supposed to be this perfect partnership, 2 people lifting each other up. But sometimes, love becomes a mirror, showing you everything you're afraid to see. And if you're brave enough to face it, even the deepest betrayal can become a lesson. A lesson in resilience, in self-respect, in knowing that you can walk away from what no longer serves you and still be whole. So, if you've ever had someone laugh at your dreams, remember this. Their laughter is not the final word. You are. You are the author of your story, the architect of your future. And no one, no matter how loud their doubts or how cruel their betrayal, can take that away from you. In the end, the betrayal that nearly broke me became the reason I learned to trust my own voice above all else. And in that, I found a kind of freedom I'd never known before, because sometimes it takes losing someone else's faith to finally find your own.